So it's New Year's Day at the time of filming this. I've returned home, as you can see from the wallpaper, and I wanted to do a video. And as long-term viewers will know, every 6 months or so, I've done a heavyweight rankings video, and it's been 6 months since last time I did it, and I've had a few questions saying when's the next one coming. People seem to enjoy listening to these heavyweight lists, so I've had a bit of a sit down, and once again, as of January 2017, I've drawn up my top 30 heavyweights on the planet. Possibly a good time to be doing it. We've had Joshua fight recently, we've had Povetkin, Parker, a lot of the big names in the sport fight recently. So I thought I'd write down my top 30 heavyweight lists, and we're going to do this across 3 videos. So we're going to do 30 to 21 in this video, 20 to 11 in video 2, and then 10 to 1 in the final video. So before we get into it, let me start by saying, because I think people misunderstand what I mean in these videos sometimes. At no stage am I intending this to be a list based on who I think would win head to head. This is based on form in the book. This is based on resume. What I'm getting at is I do not necessarily believe that number 29 beats number 30 or number 4 beats number 5. It's more that I've ranked the guy at 4 higher than I've ranked the guy at 5 based on the quality of wins, the quality of resumes, and what they've actually proven in the ring. So I think that's the first thing to bear in mind, is that this doesn't necessarily factor in how much I rate a particular fighter. It just factors in how much I rate a particular fighter's resume, if that makes sense. So the main factor I look at here is notable wins on their resume. Of course, closely related to that is notable losses, which are also taken into account. I do include historic wins. Just because somebody hasn't had a notable win for a year or two or something of that nature, that doesn't mean I necessarily rule that out. One thing I should say at the start of this is I'm not including Tyson Fury in this top 30 list, because Tyson Fury's alluded to the fact that he has potentially retired from the sport. I know there's been rumours recently that he's going to come back in 2017, but as it stands, Tyson Fury is a guy who had retired from boxing, who has been inactive for an extended period of time, and hasn't announced a comeback fight. So as it stands, Tyson Fury is not rated in the list. Obviously, he will come back into the rankings should he confirm a return and become an active boxer again. In terms of the eye test, as I've said already, for me, this is about form in the book. This is about wins and losses. If two fighters have an incredibly different set of form, let's say an incredibly similar set of form, let's say they've beaten the same fighter or fought a few of the same opponents, then I'll look in the eye test. So if one guy is labouring to points victories over those opponents, whereas another guy is blasting them out, that's when I'll consider eye test. But I'll only consider that if, as I say, the wins and losses are very, very similar. Finally, one final thing I'll say in terms of how I've rated this is there have been some fighters in this list where the nature of their losses have proved the positive. Let's say someone has taken a world-class fighter to a split decision. I've factored that into an extent as well, because it shows sort of what level they're operating at. Anyway, I've talked about how I've done this in enough detail. Let me get into it, and we're going to start in this video with numbers 30 through to numbers 21. And this is going to be, as I say, as of January 2017, the guys who I've got in my top 30. So starting at number 30, I've got a guy who's been on the peripheries of the heavyweight division for quite some time. Very much the fringe contender, which is Alexander Ustinov. Ustinov, he's got some names that people who are heavyweight fans will recognise. Most famously, David Tua, the likes of Travis Walker, Konstantin Eretz, Denis Baktov. He's yet to have a sort of landmark win, but I understand that he's engaged in this WBA belt situation. It seems likely that at some point in 2017, Alexander Ustinov will have an opportunity to move himself up this list. He has one notable loss against Kubrat Pulev, where he, to be honest, was a bit outclassed on that particular night, and potentially that showed his limitations as a fighter in terms of his potential upside. But nevertheless, I thought on the basis of his wins, he deserves to still be considered there or thereabouts in terms of the heavyweight division, so I've got him at number 30. One place ahead of him at number 29, I've got a fighter who's a very unpopular, controversial figure, who I myself am not overly fond of, which is Erkan Tepe. Fighters who have failed drug tests will be included on this list unless they are banned. I'm not going to ignore fighters who are active heavyweights if they haven't got a ban attached to their head. Now, I appreciate that. I'm going to get some comments from people saying, how can you rate a drug cheat, etc. But this list isn't really about my personal opinions on a fighter and the political side. It's more about which heavyweights are active in the sport and the quality of their wins and losses. Now, Erkan Tepe fought recently and lost to Christian Hamer. Had he not lost, unfortunately, we'd have had to have rated him a lot higher, because he does actually have some decent wins on his resume. Obviously, David Price, Johan Depar, I guess those are his two biggest name wins. And with the quality of those wins on his resume, as well as some wins against the likes of Michael Sprott, Martin Rogan, I didn't feel that I could exclude him from this list just off the basis of the Christian Hamer loss. But he slides down dramatically. He's down to number 29, and you'd have to say it looks questionable as to how good a fighter he's going to be now he appears to have come off the performance-enhancing drugs. So, yeah, Erkan Tepe in at number 29. At number 28, a guy who's well known to UK fans at the minute, Eric Molina. Molina's had some high-profile losses. Deontay Wilder, where he performed with credit. Anthony Joshua, where he was pretty much wiped out. He lost to Chris Arreola, who stopped him inside a round, I think. And because of that, Eric Molina's hard to rank much higher than 28th at the minute. But I did want to include him just on the basis of his win against Thomas Ademic. I know Thomas Ademic is a faded fighter. I know he's never been a legit heavyweight, but nevertheless, he's been a classy operator in his time. And I thought that Eric Molina's relatively recent win over Thomas Ademic meant that there wasn't 30 heavyweights I could pick above him at this stage in terms of quality of resume. So I've got Eric Molina at 28. Moving on, if we go to number 27, we actually have another Anthony Joshua victim, which is Dominic Breazeale. Breazeale possibly showed a bit more courage and a bit more durability than Eric Molina in his fight against Anthony Joshua. The reason I've rated him slightly higher is his wins against Amir Mansour and Fred Cassie, both of which were sort of closely fought contests that potentially could have gone either way. But nevertheless, Breazeale got the victory in both of those fights, and I thought the quality of those wins was just enough to edge him ahead of Eric Molina. And despite the loss to Anthony Joshua, I thought having those names on his resume meant he deserved inclusion in the top 30. So I've got Breazeale at 27. Moving on, the heavyweight who I've got ranked at number 26 is Derek Chisora. Chisora's a guy who's probably best known for high-profile losses. Tyson Fury, Vladimir Klitschko, David Haye, most recently Kubrat Pulev and Dillian White. But nevertheless, Derek Chisora showed in his recent fight against Dillian White that he still retained a lot of ability and some potential to cause problems in the heavyweight division. And this is when at the start of the video I was talking about how I would potentially factor in the nature of the loss. Chisora's nature of loss against Dillian White makes me think he's still a top 30 competitor. And if you actually look back at some of his historic form, wins over Kevin Johnson, Edmund Gerber, Sam Sexton twice, a knockout win over Malik Scott, which is probably the biggest name on his resume, I thought as a result Derek Chisora still deserved his place in the top 30, and I've got him listed at number 26. At number 25, Vyacheslav Glazkov. Glazkov has been inactive since losing by stoppage to Charles Martin. But again, based on some of the historic form on his resume, I thought we had to include him. Wins over Steve Cunningham, Thomas Ademic, a draw with Malik Scott. Glazkov's a guy who had some fortunate luck in the early stages of his career. Many thought he was beaten by Malik Scott. Many thought he was beaten by the other guy who's Derek Rossi. But nevertheless, with those names on his resume, Cunningham, Adamek, the draw with Scott, I didn't think it would be fair to exclude him. So Glazkov ranked at 25, potentially a talented fighter, someone who could re-enter the top 20 if he gets a few wins under his belt in 2017. At number 24, I had to put Charles Martin. And I know Charles Martin's an unpopular figure after the nature of his loss to Anthony Joshua. But I didn't think you could have Glazkov any lower than 25, given the nature of the wins that we just discussed. And I had to rate Martin above him, because as I've said on numerous times in this video, this list is based on resume. This list is based on form in the book. And the form in the book is that Charles Martin beat Glazkov by stoppage. And for what it's worth, based on my eye test, Charles Martin was actually getting the better of him in the 7 or 8 minutes of fighting that preceded the stoppage in that fight. So I've gone Charles Martin at 24. I understand that he has a return date booked some way in 2017. So we'll get to see Charles Martin come back. And I think there's still a bit of uncertainty as to whether Charles Martin is in any way a capable heavyweight. So that will be an interesting one to check out. At number 23, I've got Hughie Fury, a guy who I rate as one of the most talented prospects in the sport. Hard to rate him any higher than 23 for me, based on the quality of opposition he's been in with. He had a good win against Andrei Rudenko. Rudenko is a decent fighter who would probably make my top 40, although didn't quite make the cut for my top 30. Rudenko gave Lucas Brown absolute hell over the distance. So Hughie Fury's win over Rudenko is good form. His win over Fred Cassie, despite the fact he didn't look good in that fight, is also good form. So I've got Hughie Fury at 23. And he's a guy who I expect to break into the top 10 in 2017. He just needs one of those big name fights to get himself higher up the list. And number 22, Jarrell Miller. And this is one of those occasions where I did factor in eye test. You know, Miller and Hughie Fury, both of their best wins were against Fred Cassie. I thought Miller looked a bit better than Hughie Fury when he fought Fred Cassie. That's not to say Miller's potentially got higher upside. It's just based on what we've seen so far, I thought Miller deserved to be ranked slightly higher. Was able to force stoppage. I believe Fred Cassie actually withdrew from that fight as a result of the pressure that Jarrell Miller was pouring on. So he's another exciting prospect and someone who I think could have the potential to go much higher than 22 when we review this list in 6 months or 12 months' time. At number 21, Arthur Spilka, a very talented fighter, but losses to Deontay Wilder, losses to Bryant Jennings made it hard to include him too much higher than 21. I understand that there's relatively strong rumours he might fight Dominic Breazeale, and that would be a big fight that I'd favour him in. Historically, Spilka's got some relevant form on his resume. He's had wins against Thomas Ademic, Mike Mollo, Manuel Quezada, and a few others as well. So, yeah, I've got Arthur Spilka at 21, another guy who performed with credit in his last fight against Deontay Wilder, and we certainly look forward to seeing how he gets on against Dominic Breazeale. I believe the two are due to fight in February. The winner of that fight is certainly one you'd think would make it into the top 20 list, and could potentially go on to have one or two further big fights in the heavyweight division. So there you go, guys. That's the first 10 guys. Just to reiterate, 30, we've got Alexander Ustinov. At number 29, we've got Erkan Tepe. 28, Eric Molina. 27, Dominic Breazeale. 26, Derek Chisora. 25, Glazkov. 24, Martin. 23, Hughie Fury. 22, Jarrell Miller. And 21, Arthur Spilka. I'm going to upload the next part of this video in the next day or so, so please stay tuned to the channel so you can check that out. If you're new, hit the subscribe button so you can check out the other two parts of this video when they're released. And if you've enjoyed this video, and if you enjoy these type of videos in general, leave a comment in the section below. Let me know your thoughts on the guys I've picked. Which ones should I have included who I haven't? Which ones should I have excluded? And please take the time to hit the thumbs up button, which will support the channel. Thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate it.